tell you, Robocop for me, I was doing conventions at the time with my father, who's the bearded man over there.
Hi, Dad.
And we were set up at a show, and a bunch of the effects guys from Robocop at the time that y'all were shooting Robocop came in, because I sold the coolest movie posters, stuff from the 20s, 30s, 40s, all the way up to now. And I said, so, y'all work in the film industry? And they said, what are you working on? They said, we're doing this piece of shit film called Robocop. And they looked at me, and I said, who's directing? They said, this fucking madman. He doesn't even speak English. He's driving us insane. And this was an incredibly important moment in my life, because I was being told Robocop is going to be a piece of shit. Okay? Now, Robocop, when it finally opened in Austin, Texas, it was at the Americana. And just a gorgeous it was the biggest screen we've ever had in Austin. And Dad and I go because even though we knew Robocop was definitively going to be a piece of shit, we see everything. We love movies, okay? So we go in, and you're fucking magnificent, dude.
Thank you, man.
It's just
Thank you.
to be playing a character that is this, in terms of the human emotion coming out of it for the vast majority of the film. It's extraordinary, the amount of heart, soul, and, I heard from somebody that was on set that in between when they'd have the big setup changes and they'd have to move stuff around, you would go off to your Winnebago and play your trumpet, compose some poetry, and you said you had robo thoughts.
That's right, yeah.
What are robo thoughts?
Oh, man, what are robo thoughts? Well, who was here for the last film? You all here for the last one?
Yeah.
So look, I wanted to do this movie. I was a fan of Verhoeven. I got the same thing from my agent at CAA. There's this funky movie called Robocop. Looks like a B movie to me. Directed by this guy who can't speak English. He's a Dutch director. I'd seen everything he directed. Yeah. I was a huge fan. Fourth Man, Spetters, Soldier of Orange. The guy's an opera director. He takes these small personal stories of redemption, resurrection with this huge opera behind it. I said, this is going to be brilliant. I said, I don't know what it is. It's going to be brilliant. So when I got it, I was 6 months studying with Moni Yakin, who's head of the movement department at Juilliard, working out this movement, working out doing I was also training for a marathon, which really kept me very lithesome. And I was researching everything from the Golem, the Hebraic story of the Golem, all the way to Book of Job and all these things of resurrection. And by the time I was doing the film, the air would go out of the balloon if I went to sort of hang out.
Yeah.
You're in the thing, and every day I had to do these exercises in it. I'd been doing it for 6 months, but you had to work that thing. It's really like you got a Formula One team around you, changing out arms and all this stuff, and it took 30 minutes, 45 minutes of warm up, stretching, then working the inner suit, then working the outer suit, doing all of this stuff, and by the time the head went on, and then I had to do the vocal exercise in the morning, and so when you're that deep into it, and they call cut, they take off the helmet, you just want to be by yourself. You can't go say, hey, what are you doing for dinner tonight? It's like the air just goes. Some people can do that. I can't do it.
I saw a 22-minute interview that you did on the set of Robocop at the time from some lady in Dallas that you used to watch on screen, and you had mentioned that the last thing in the world that you can do is, because you're getting into the headset of who this guy is, to have a conversation about football. And I believe your quote saying, when they say come to set, you're just like, man, I don't want to go work. It felt like you had just woke up or something.
That's right.
But I really started thinking, because of method is getting inside of a character and getting into the role, with RoboCop, you're dealing with a character that for a majority of his time, he is devoid of all of that. How
That's right.
do you, I mean, Buddhist monks spend their entire lives to excise ego and all of that. For you to do RoboCop, what were the sort of robo-thought exercises that you said you were doing back at that time?
You know, they were no more than real simple intentions of get this guy. Who am I?
Singular
Who
purpose.
is my wife?
Yeah.
What is this? Look, I just have to say this. I'm really happy that you all are here. It's just like Dean Martin and Jerry Lewis. Dean Martin always said, I was really happy to join. The two greatest things I ever did were join Jerry Lewis and leave Jerry Lewis. And that's the thing with me with RoboCop. I did Robocop 2. They threw me a lot of money. RoboCop 1 was really, really, really special.
Yeah.
And the people that have not seen it, you know, I hadn't seen it in 15 years. They had a reunion showing of it in Dallas, because that's where most of it was shot. And then the two guys who wrote it, UCLA students, so they had the total reunion. Total cast, crew, everybody who's seen this movie. Nancy Allen, bad guys, Paul Verhoeven, everybody. Showed up at UCLA, invited only, with their families, to play homage to RoboCop. So I sat with Verhoeven in the back of it. It's the first time I'd seen it. And when you get stuck with a role like that, and kids come up to you and they give you a DVD, and somebody wants you to do a RoboCop, you kind of get a little tired of it. I'm mature enough now to be grateful for it, but you know, you're on to other things. It's not in your head. But people come up to you and say, like people whose taste I trust, say, this movie's anthropological. You can watch this movie in 200 years. And if you want to know at the cutting edge of the age of information and listen, they wrote this in 1981. It's about the privatization of everything. That's the moral fiber in it. I don't care if you believe in that or not. But if you privatize everything, even Julius Caesar said it. If you privatize everything, you privatize crime. Also, got it? You control everything. If business gets to control it all, they're going to control the bottom of it if you don't regulate it. These guys wrote this in 1981. It starts off with a news break about what would happen if we did not bring down apartheid. That Pretoria, right, and essentially the apartheid government is stowed with a nuclear bomb about to devastate the continent of Africa. That's the first thing you're going to see in this movie. It's also funny, and it's extraordinarily sad. And I got to say that, all in all, I'm watching this film, and it's a sociological piece of brilliance. It's the first time this year I ever got to stand back and go, God damn, man, this is like an unbelievable film. And it's just the accident of these two geniuses at UCLA and Paul Verhoeven. I want to tell you one thing. Here's a robo thought for you. We're through 8 directors, American directors. Nobody wanted to do it. They thought it was cornball. Paul Verhoeven, man. I don't know if you ever seen any of his movies. You ever seen? Yeah. Okay, the guy is nuts, but the guy's like he's got a master's degree in medieval history. He wrote a book on the historical Christ, footnoted and everything. He's a scholar. He's steeped into traditional myth, right? Okay, I'm going to show you this one thing. You're going to live this. There's a scene in it, I want to blow it for you guys. It's like essentially, there's a scene in it where initially I'm twirling a gun and Nancy Allen will remember me. She says, you know, Murphy, is that you? And then something else happens with Paul McCrane, and then I start having dreams. Verhoeven reversed this. Verhoeven said, no, the dreams first. Okay, in America movie making, and essentially the sort of epicenter of how we construct stories and how we're in love with them, is that you have physical events that happen to you, right? He sees the girl on the street. Oh, yeah, it's Mike Murray. He's a guy with the white hair. I knew him in high school. You go and you see a yearbook, and all of a sudden you have, you know, some sort of unconscious sort of metaphysical experience. That's my friend Mike Murray went to high school with. You know, of like, who is Mike Murray? And bang, it's Mike Murray, right? That's how we do it in Hollywood. That's how the 20th century novel does it. You have physical evidence, right? And you have a metaphysical reaction. Got it? I'm sitting in this suite with Verhoeven, who's steeped in the Hebraic tale of the Golem. Anybody's read the Golem? Anybody's Jewish here knows the story of the Golem? Okay, the Golem is that a town needs the bad guys wiped out. They conjure up a spirit to help them wipe out the bad guys. Then they don't want the spirit anymore. And he goes, come on, you made me. That's that. Everybody read the book of Job? Right? They take everything away from him, everything away from him, everything away from him. He's still got faith and he's restored. Or, as you can see it here, Jesus. Jesus is right out of, or Akhenaten in ancient Egypt. Your physical life is not your real life. Your metaphysical spiritual life is. So Verhoeven says to me in this suite, he says, Peter, listen. This is a story about in the name of progress, in the name of commerce, in the name of business, in the name of the world, they take a man's life. In the name of what they think is good, they sacrifice a man. But what they don't take, because it's God-given or cosmic-given, is his soul. And the soul wakes up on its own because it's the only thing they can't have. Got it? And when the soul wakes up, his soul is born out then by a physical life, not vice versa. Is this profound?
Yes.
You getting this? This is what Verhoeven brought to this movie. 8 different American directors that have never seen that shit. Never. It would have been okay. It would have been good. It would have been brilliant. The denouement of this thing is that I got to sit back. I got to stand up on stage. And Paul and I had some fights, and he almost fired me once. And then he's completely mad. And the Robo team, the special effects guys, some of those brilliant guys in the world, finally had to say, you can't come near this trailer or we're not going to work. Because he's pounding on the trailer all the time. These guys got to do 6.5 hours of my prosthetic head at the end of this movie. It's the longest prosthetic in the history of film. 6.5 hours just for the head. And then another hour and a half to put the suit on. So I worked an 8-hour day already before the day starts. Matter of fact, I was going to the set when the crew was coming in from drinking, going, hey, we're going to bed now. I'm going to work. It was grueling. It was absolutely grueling. But Paul's ingenuity, Paul's vision, Paul's particular dynamic, Paul's sense of what this movie would represent. There's scenes of crucifixion in it. There's scenes of walking on water. There's everything you can imagine here that he infused with it. And subsequently, it is the rebirth of his spirit. This is what this movie is about. And man, you can watch it forever. And I think that's what makes it classic. So I'm sitting back the first time I really got how powerful this film was only 6 months ago, and I watched it at UCLA. Now, when somebody says I want to introduce it, I don't want to go introduce Robocop. But now I'm so in touch with what brilliance that these guys brought to this film. And also my a year and a half of slavery in it, that I'd be happy to come and introduce it to you guys. I'm so enamored of what Verhoeven and these guys created and why Harry's showing it, that I'm going to come back at the end, even though they said you don't have to.
All right.
And don't be afraid to laugh, because it's funny, man. You're so great, man.
Thank you. So, man, I've seen that movie so many, and it always gets you. I mean, it's just really. Could you talk about the chemistry that you developed with Nancy Allen in the film and working with her? Because she's just one of those actresses that I've loved since forever.
We're born on the same day, and so immediately just was madly crazy about her, and we just had a great time, and it was just symbiotic immediately.
Yeah.
And like a brother and a sister, and we're still dear friends, and she's having a benefit next week. And, you can hear gossip and so forth about terrifying people on a set. Definitely Paul Verhoeven could be terrifying. I mean, he's a brilliant guy and a great cat to have dinner with and so forth, but he's another human being on a set. And some guys are like that, you know. It's like, I don't know if you guys play golf. Anybody plays golf? Yeah, well, you know, you play golf with some guy you think you know all the time. You see him on a golf course, and all of a sudden they're like the Exorcist, you know. And that's Paul, and Paul was very tough on her at the beginning. And then, can we
kill that?
Yeah, get the music off, man.
Ordinarily, we would be at a different theater.
No, it always starts. All movie theaters have it now. It goes on automatically.
Alamo
Right?
Draft House does it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
But Paul, you know, once both Nancy and I bonded together because once we saw what Paul was up to, we had to get on Paul's speed because Paul hits the floor, you know, in 7th gear. He's not a guy that warms up. A lot of directors, you know, they find 4 or 3 shots, 5 or 6 scenes, I don't know, then they're warming up. Paul's like in 7th gear, the time he hits it. And so Nancy and I sort of bonded in, I don't want to say defense, but sort of in so that we know that each of us wasn't crazy, he was.
Right.
And
it was an affirmation of
right.
Josh's reality.
That's right. That's
Yes.
right. And I just loved her, man. I love working with her. I love her as a human being, and she's really gracious.
Well, you just had, in this movie, there's so many mad geniuses at work. You know, it's just people
Right.
that I love. You got Verhoeven, you got someone like Ed Neumeyer and Miner who wrote
who
the
are mad
script.
geniuses, right?
You got Basil Polidorus who, you know,
Was something
gave
else.
an astonishing soul to the music and
Yeah.
the thread of the film. And you got someone like Phil Tippett who he's currently
the
doing
original.
Mad God right now.
Is somebody going to fix that music?
Yeah, they're working on it.
Thank you.
And
No, he didn't fix it. Fix it!
Yeah, I shot that too. They're going out there and turn it off.
Fix it!
and then you have someone like Rob Bottin who
Well, you got Phil Tippett and Rob Bottin, who are truly, I don't know if you guys know the legacy of these two guys. I mean, Phil Tippett is George Lucas's guy, Rob Bottin's an original. But anyway, go ahead, yeah. I mean,
But I mean, when you have that many just legends that sort of accumulated to help create,
for cheap, too.
yeah,
Because John
for
Davison got him cheap.
Yeah,
I mean,
well,
he beat him up.
John Davison, he's a bit of a legend himself,
Yeah.
you know. And I mean, first producer I ever had altercations with was John Davison over Starship Troopers back in the earliest days of my site, and
Oh,
we
really?
sort of went to heads. And he asked me, I had gotten these designs for the creatures for Starship Troopers. I got demanded by the studio to take them down. Then John Davison called me up 2 days later after I had filed this thing for where I had fans write the studio to protest them causing censorship to young journalists stuff. And John Davison calls me up and says, Harry, I just wanted to call and tell you you can put those designs back up if you want. Just tell everyone it's okay. And I said, nah, John. I said, listen, I don't pet the dog that bit me. So I said, those are going to stay down for a while, but why don't we just move forward from this point, you know?
Oh, good. You
And-
called
and-
him on him.
Yeah, no. You have to. I
Sure
mean,
you do.
otherwise producers will walk off.
No, they'll roll over you.
Yeah,
They'll roll
no.
over you.
I read my
Yeah.
stuff.
Yeah.
So, of all those mad geniuses, how did they each touch you as an artist at a young stage moving forward? What did you learn from that group?
I was impressed by them. First of all, Rob Bottin's a very, very sensitive guy. He's like a quiet sort of, like a Zen gorilla in a way, you know. And I had to go out to his place out in, what is that place in right side of LA? I can't remember. It's past Altadena. And I had to do all that taping. You know, they put you in they put you in plaster in Paris to measure your head, and you sit for hours. I mean, it's longer than the makeup to have each little thing made customary to you. He was great. I do want to say this, is that credit where credit is due. And it's been there long enough because I got chastised for it. I didn't mean any harm, but whatever the communication was between Paul and Rob Bottin about the suit, I knew that had been measured for the suit. And if you see a credit up there from Moni Yakin, they're making a documentary about him now at the BBC. He's been the instructor of movement at Juilliard University for a long time. He studied with Marcel Marceau under Jean-Louis Barrault. Anybody know who Jean-Louis Barrault is? No. Okay, Jean-Louis Barrault is the father of French mime. If you ever see the greatest movie ever made, and I mean everybody's favorite movie. Matter of fact, I was at dinner with Mike Nichols, one of my mentors. He said, what's your favorite movie? I said, Children of Paradise. He goes, not that. Not that. That's everybody's favorite movie. It's like saying Marlon Brando's your favorite actor. You can't choose Children of Paradise. But John Louis Burroughs is one of the great mimes ever in Children of Paradise. And Moni studied with him, and we had developed this very serpentine, liquid sort of movement. It was almost like Tai Chi with staccato ends to it. And it just bears saying that whatever the communication was between Paul and Rob Bottin, the suit didn't come in ready to shoot. And we were shooting 2 weeks of other stuff and Murphy's stuff before the suit came in. So the Robocop stuff didn't start till a good 20 days. Did you know this?
No, I didn't.
The 20 days
had to scare the studio like crazy because they didn't
well,
get
you
to
know,
see Robocop.
Orion had a reputation of being very hands-off and very laissez-faire and very trusting of its talent. Everybody liked to work for Orion. And but they were getting nervous. And then the suit came in, and the inner suit, like there's a wetsuit inner suit. Like I said, I was have to do these warm-ups to it. It took me 3 hours, and we were shooting to put on the inner suit. And then another 7 hours to put on the outer suit. It's 10 hours. And it was on a Friday. And I was like, I lost my mind. And Ed Neumeyer was kind of like running amok. Great guy, but we were all caving. And Ra was extraordinarily nervous because this thing was not working. Looked great, it was not working. We shot one little scene. I still see it. I'm not going to tell you what scene it is, but I don't have control of the arms yet. I really don't know how to work the suit. It's not really lithesome. I'm trying to fight it. It's a mess. There's one scene that we shot on that Friday. And then we all kind of fell apart. Paul threw a shit fit. Rob threw another shit fit. Ed tried to get into the mix. I got into Ed's face about getting into it. Then I said, this is not going to work for me. I don't know how I'm going to do 10 hours a day. And everybody just went home.
Yeah.
I get a call in the dead of night. It's on a Thursday, as a matter of fact. Get a call in the dead of night from my agent, who's my one and only agent, and he just retired. Said, Peter, Paul wants to fire everybody. He doesn't like Ed anymore, and he's always hated Rob, and now he's afraid that you're going to give him a Rutger Hauer, because him and Rutger Hauer are old friends, and Rutger Hauer always beats him up. He's going to get another Rutger Hauer thing out of you. And I said, well, look, the fucking suit doesn't work. And he said, well, what can you do to heal it? And I said, I don't know, man. 10 minutes later, the head of Orion, Mike Medavoy, still a good friend, calls up and says, it's all falling apart here, and we're really thinking of pulling the plug on this movie because it's not working. What can we do to make it work? I don't know. I said, my agent just called. I can make peace with these guys, but I don't know how we're going to solve this suit thing. He says, okay, I got an idea. What if we did tests with it over the weekend? We get a warehouse and we start see what we do to make it work. And I said to Mike, you got to bring Moni Yakin back down here. Fly him in tomorrow. Pay him off from his Juilliard thing, but get him down here because he's the guy that designed this, and that's not what's not working. So we meet in this warehouse on Saturday, and Orion is really about to pull the plug on this flick because of this, not only the suit consternation, but everybody's in a panic. Okay, so we meet in this warehouse. There's Rob. He's scared. Paul's pissed off. He's scared. John's trying to manically hold it together. We don't let Ed Neumeyer in because he's 20 years old. He's bubble gummer. He's got opinions for everybody. And all he is oil on all flames. I'm trying to put on this thing, and in comes Moni. Moni's an Israeli, French, war veteran, solid, quiet mime, a dancer. And he walks in. He's the only voice of reason. And he really saved this film. I always say he saved the film. I said it in this documentary, BBC. Because while these guys are flipping out, Moni goes up to Rob and Paul and says, what can we cut? Can you cut out the elbows, cut out the wrists, cut out all the joints, cut out the rubber, just tear it out. And they start doing it. And, Rob didn't want to do it. Paul said, I don't know what's there. And John Davis says, just do what he says. And they started cutting, right? Mm-hmm. Then he started removing pieces of the plastic. It's sort of like this titanium-like plastic that were like adhering my elbows, so forth. Then he had pulled out the bottom of the shoes. Then he pulled out like the backs of them. And finally he made something that I could just barely start to move in. Then he took me aside and said this, now bear with me, this is one of the things every crisis is an opportunity. And it's definitely one of the beautiful things, just as Paul's direction did, that made this more of a organic thing for me. And you say the robo thoughts, how everything's slowed down. Right, Moni said, listen, he took me aside, he says, I have to work with Peter for about 45 minutes. So they're setting up all these tests. What they're gonna do is they're gonna do tests. They're gonna look at the tests, they're gonna send them back to LA on a Sunday, they're gonna print them on a weekend, in 24 hours. Mike Medavoy and Bob Bernstein are going to get on the phone and say whether this movie's going to be made or not. So Moni's just calm, man. And he comes over and he says, listen, you have to slow everything down. You have to slow everything out. You have to make it really, really exaggerated. Don't fight this thing. It's never going to be liquid. It's always going to be like really slow. And I started working on this stuff with it. Now, mind you, I can't do it now, but I was really, really good at it then. Because you have to make each one of these movements really slow with like a big head turn. You have to click this stuff off. And I said, man, it feels so phony. It just feels phony. It doesn't feel, hip. It feels like bad opera. And he said, do it. And he said, even bigger. He said, got me to do this stuff even bigger, pulling the gun, bigger, head, bigger, working this inner suit. And then we shot not much of tests. Harry, we shot probably about 40 minutes of tests, right? Walking, turning, slow, pulling out gun, slow. That's how slow it had to be. I go out of the place. I said, I don't know, Moni. He said, Peter, you'd be absolutely perfect. Here's the difference between an Israeli French guy who's been in war and a bunch of movie people. I said, they're all in a panic. He said, yeah, they're all in a panic because they're all afraid. He says, the kid's afraid because he's a kid and it's his first movie. He says, the designer's afraid because he's just too sensitive. And Paul Verhoeven's afraid because he's Dutch. And then he stopped and he said to Peter, the Dutch are depressed. I really? He said, yeah, they're inventive but depressed. So I walk in and I said, so it's going to be fantastic. It felt like horrible. It felt like really the wheels had come off. And he was absolutely certain that Medavoy would see this thing and be ecstatic. And the next Monday, we get up and John Davis comes, this Medavoy's ecstatic. And Paul is still, I get it. Paul just goes, no, I don't think it's so ecstatic. I think it's got problems and whatever. And Moni's just standing behind him going, yeah. Moni gets a film just about the time that Blockbuster started doing video stores. So Moni said, but Moni, it still feels bad. So Moni stayed for 2 weeks working with me, just moving that suit. And he said, you got to watch this film. This is us with film history and so forth, and you guys with film history, because it's all connective tissue. There's no film made in a vacuum. They're all ripping off somebody else. And even the first films are ripping off narrative art, and that narrative art is ripping off some mosaics on a wall, and those mosaics on a wall are ripping off the caves of Lascaux, which are 2,000 years ago, and that's ripping off Egypt. It's all one connective tissue. That's why I study art history. Art history is film history. It's just visual, connective entertainment. That, like I said, leverages the intelligence and it gives you aesthetic delight. So he says, watch this film. And he shows me Sergei Eisenstein's Ivan the Terrible. Anybody seen that movie?
Yes.
Okay, it's a silent movie. You ever seen it? It's like 3.5 hours long. Okay, the guy that plays it was an opera singer-dancer named Nikolai Cherkasov. He was not a naturalistic actor. He was like a guy of the stage. The movie's very naturalistic, stylized, but it's basically naturalistic, so you see these naturalistic performances. The first time you see Ivan, I put this thing on, he says, you have to watch this movie, get this. First time you see Ivan the Terrible, Cherkasov takes this step and goes like that, and it is so phony. It's like the worst Dracula imitation you've ever seen. And he turns and this guy zoom into his face. I said, really, Moni, just keep watching. Okay, it's like watching also Children of Paradise where you see Arletty with that little voice, they said, bonjour. I said, you can't watch this for 2 minutes. 5 minutes into it, you'd follow the earth, give her the credit cards, the house, everything, go down the tubes. The same with Nikolai Cherkasov. I'm watching this 10 minutes in. You can't take your eyes off him, and everything is like really pronounced. And I get it, that Eisenstein's making this like abstraction of a horrific guy. Because if the guy's just natural, it's just facts and history. But he wants to show you the abstraction of this bad beast. And man, 2 days into this, I said, that's it. It's a beast. It's just like the golem. It's exactly the golem. It's a beast caught, trapped.
No, I always thought the.
But that only came after 4 days of,
Yeah.
of doing this stuff. That only came after after film almost died. That only came after Modi came in. Before that, it was more like Spider-Man. And that problem gave me the character and subsequently the movie.
So originally the movement was going to be very much like Spider-Man.
Really liquid.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm glad you had problems.
I'm glad it did too. Yeah. I mean, it's astounding, isn't it? I mean, you don't give up. You don't just.
What was it like the first time you saw you moving as Robocop mixed with those sound effects? Because the sound effects of the movement of it just gives an immense power to the movement and everything. Because it all feels perfect all of a sudden. You can imagine it being different.
I loved it. I was absolutely thrilled.
Yeah.
I was absolutely thrilled that they didn't tweak it.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't do any stop motion animation tweaks to it.
Yeah.
That they really used except for like I say, the one scene where I couldn't make the suit work.
Yeah.
But from the time I'm getting out of the chair, on it to getting into the thing, and also with the head off and all the stuff with Clarence, then I was really into it. And when they added that, I was thrilled with it. I was absolutely thrilled with it.
Cool. Let's
Yeah.
get a couple of questions
Yeah.
from the audience. And,
Yeah, in the back.
You said that it took you 10 hours to get into the suit. How long?
The first day.
In case of emergencies, like how quick could you get out of it?
How can you take
No, there
a
were
piss
no.
in the Robocop costume?
Let me ask this: it had a front end and a rear end, man. There were no emergencies. About that was Moni's doing also. So, but that was the first day. By the time that was on a Thursday, by the time it was a Monday, man, Moni was driving that suit, and that suit was. Then we got it down to 2.5 hours. Finally, we got it down to a really easy hour and 25 minutes. But that third act head, man, was 6.5 hours with Stefan Dupuis. He's a genius. 6.5 hours just for that head, man. I don't know if I could do
Never
that
seen
anymore.
makeup like that.
Yeah.
Right over here.
What are your experiences after this movie when you see even movies made before that or especially since then of other people who went through similar things? And the obvious is Darth Vader, but other similar situations where people have all this robotic type of environments and situations. And I wonder what your experience is.
I honest to God, Star Wars predates me by 10 years. Predates RoboCop by 10 years. Post RoboCop, there's nothing like RoboCop. I mean, there isn't. That's why I was saying I could throw RoboCop into the pan of a lot of other sci-fi flicks, but then when I saw it with that cast and crew 6 months ago at UCLA, and I got to sit back and just look at the film, and in spite of that doesn't have CGI, it's got Phil Tippett, who's genius stop motion stuff. The film and Verhoeven's power, and like I say, the thing I found in it, I don't compare anything to it. Look, here's the thing I don't compare it to it. There's not a damn science fiction film except maybe The Day the Earth Stood Still that has a social message like this, that has social history in it like this, that gets you on 4 or 5 different levels. I mean, he knew that the end of that movie is Murphy. What's your name? And that's Resurrection. I've never seen any film, when I just decided, man, 6 months ago, I've not seen a sci-fi film that is that resonant anthropologically since The Day the Earth Stood Still, the original Day the Earth Stood Still.
Yes,
And
definitely.
I venture to say maybe you could bring up one, but there's a lot of them that entertain me. Star Wars certainly entertains me. It doesn't stay with me. The Day the Earth Stood Still stays with me. I saw it at 5 years old, 10 years old, 15 years old, and it still stays with me. I don't know. It's not because I'm in it. It's just because of those. Just because of the myth in it is just so resonant that I can't really compare it to anything. Mike.
When they took the mask off,
Right.
kind of followed the part in the film where the soul was beginning to come out. Now, did they do that so your face would show emotion? And I noticed that you really tried to kind of tone down the emotion through your face.
I hope I did and not just tried, but
It still came through. And
Yeah.
And I was wondering, that's an actor's skill. But were you trying to do that? Were you trying to tone down the emotion, but at least still show the humanity coming through at that point?
That's your question from before. Yeah, there's an interesting thing about that, is that, did you notice, I hope you noticed, maybe you didn't, but the voice modulated after the head kick, right on the time. The voice was no longer, until I came to arrest him, and then it was Paul's brilliant idea. It says, I told Paul, when I take this helmet off, and I start to have a sense of a family, that part of this programming is going away. And he said, great. And then we got to the denouement, the end of the thing, and he said, maybe you just want to bring it back to kill Dick. I said, good idea. I don't know why, but yeah, let's do. The interesting thing is that Harry was reminding me that the best dubbing systems in the world are in Italy. Italy, I have the same dubber I've had for 30 years. Why? Because Mussolini, in his paranoia in 1932, demanded by law that all Italian movies be dubbed. Subsequently, Italy never shot with sync sound until 1980. Got that? So all those guys you love, Fellini, De Sica, Visconti, Pasolini, all of them, Rossellini, all those guys had all of those performances. Even Marcello Mastroianni, he's looping. He's in a sound stage doing all that dialogue. You understand? There's no sync sound in Italy. Now, they're so good at it that Marcello Mastroianni, me, doesn't matter, Robert De Niro, Al Pacino, whoever, Kevin Costner, we all got the one guy who has done us, sounds exactly like us in Italian. Then they got another guy in French. They got the dubbing business in Italy is like astounding. And they're the best dubbers. And all the directors modify and moderate their own dubbing. So my dubber in this missed it. And I saw the Italian version of Robocop about 15 years ago. And I'm watching it with my wife in a screening. And man, he got it down. I mean, it sounds like me with the voice lower. And then they get to that, and it's the same voice. He never modulated. And it's still talking like I can feel, but I can't remember them. And they missed it completely, man. And that was a conscious choice, you're absolutely right. But that's the humanity coming through the thing, and yeah.
It sounded like, literally came across that way. It sounded like the emotion was coming out, and whatever you were, the character was still not comfortable with it. So
yeah,
that's what you did. It worked.
It definitely was, man. If you ever loved someone and they weren't around no more, that's all you got to tap into there. And if you haven't had that happen to you, then you're dead.
Right there.
So you've been really enthusiastic and passionate in your answers, and
do you not want me to be?
That's great. It's really I'm loving it. But then when I watch Naked Lunch and you've got that monotone throughout, and I've noticed every time I watch Naked Lunch I start speaking monotone too. So could you explain the process of how you kind of tone down your natural enthusiasm?
When I was making Naked Lunch, I begged Cronenberg to do Naked Lunch. I grew up with Naked Lunch. I'm a product of the 60s. I am an aging, acid head, earringed old hippie, sort of wannabe freak who also dated sorority girls. So, I was trying to do the best of both worlds. But Naked Lunch was a profound influence on me. There's no satirical book since Gulliver's Travels like it. It was prescient to, it predicted AIDS, it predicted crack cocaine, it predicted liposuction. I mean, he says in there, he wrote in 1958, women in Beverly Hills will be standing in line to have fat sucked out of them with tubes. That's in 58, bro. There's a homosexual African disease that will insinuate itself into the white commercial market and make worldwide panic. It's an astounding book, man. And also the phrasing in it and so forth. The phrase I said before, which I'm going to open up this paper on Tuesday at UCLA. I did tell you guys that?
Yes.
I'm not gonna do that though, because that's not gonna work. But Burroughs, I spent also 6 months with, and I'd asked Cronenberg. I wrote him a letter. I saw the advertisement was in Cannes. I was there to promote RoboCop 2. I wrote him a letter and said, if you don't have Bill Lee cast, this is my Bible. And he called me up and said, I'm gonna come to New York. Well, let's talk, and that's the rest of its history. And then I met Burroughs, and we had phenomenal time. And I was with Burroughs for a while. And we'll have to make a movie before it came back. So Burroughs talks in a monotone. You see Drugstore Cowboy? It's one of the great performances ever. Him and Matt Dillon. Also, that thing he wrote at the end of Drugstore Cowboy, he wrote it. That's not Gus Van Sant. That's Bill Burroughs and his particular clique into the metaphors of hypocrisy in the world. So once you're listening to Burroughs for about 8 hours, then you're going to start talking like Bill Burroughs, because that's exactly how he talks. And he talks very wryly. And I want to give you something about what balls Bill Burroughs had. I went to New York, and immediately about 3 weeks after I was in New York was the Stonewall. You know what Stonewall is? All you homophobes, can you pick up a book and read something, for Christ's sake? So that's what I'm telling you. My tenor player, man, didn't even know there was a Stonewall. He didn't even know that gays... When I went to New York, if you held hands and you're same sex, the cops busted you, man, and hit you. They raided you and knocked you down for holding hands. And that was in 72, man. And you go to the theater place, and there were a couple of pockets, like Jimmy Ray's in the theater bar, where gays could kind of sit, women and men, by themselves and like hold hands, but you'd have to watch the door because the vice cops would, isn't this sick? I mean, what were we, under a fucking rock? In any case, Burroughs and another guy named Pier Paolo Pasolini, you know who he is? Great social essayist, poet, filmmaker, wrote scripts for Fellini, was essentially assassinated by the Italian CIA. And another guy named Jean Genet. Anybody know who he is? By the way, all of Sons of Anarchy, if you're watching that, is based on Jean Genet, Maid's Balcony, Everything's the Life of Cockroaches. Anybody know Jean Genet, what I'm talking about? Yeah. Tough, bald-headed, leather boy, punker, gay guy, who was, even after he was awarded the Académie Française Prize, he was still walking in to dime stores stealing Kleenex. And the guy that would bail him out was, who's the guy who did Beauty and the Beast? That great, Jean Cocteau. Cocteau would bail him out of jail, and the Perry Match said, "You're worth $1 million. What are you going to this drugstore and stealing this stuff for?" He said, "Force of habit." Okay, those three guys actually knew each other, and they each called themselves. They weren't really great buddies, but Burroughs was very good friends with Genet, and an acquaintance of Pasolini. And they called themselves queer. Got it? Queer. Okay. In the levels of, if you go to education now, and if you go to college, and you study anything in the humanities whatsoever, history, language, anything, art history, sociology, anything, there are different methodologies that you have to take a class in methodologies. Because it's so complex now, you have to study the black methodology, black American methodology, African methodology, Euro-colonial methodology, feminist methodology, American, Mesoamerican, that's how they look at history. You understand? Each one of these cultures look differently. Okay, when you're looking at homosocial methodology, which, by the way, you're in upper level education, you have to look at that methodology. It's not called gay theory, guys and girls. It's called queer theory. That's the methodology of homosociality in the world and homosexual relationships. It ain't called gay. It's called queer. After three guys who had huge it's the 1950s, man. And you say I'm queer? That made people run for, get their shotguns and stuff. And Burroughs, man, I never forget it when I had to come back to New York. I went down to New York for a board of something or other for a Playwrights Foundation, and I came back. We had to do an interview because all three American stations in the Canadian broadcasting were interviewing Burroughs and Cronenberg and me about the fact that this book was finally being made. It was the anniversary of Stonewall. And they said, "Mr. Burroughs, do you have anything to say about it's the week that is emblemizing Stonewall, the riots in Manhattan that began the gay rights movement?" And Bill Burroughs said, "I have never been part of any movement, and I'd never been gay a day in my life." And then there was this dead beat. And then the guy said, "You're not gay." "No, I am queer." And that's how Bill Burroughs talked. And it was never more emphatic than that. Nothing was ever more emphatic than that. I mean, I just looked at Burroughs and I thought, what, I don't know, gifted guy, but incredible amount of courage. Wonder he wasn't shot or something. Anyway, that's your homosocial and social studies lesson for today.
Okay, last couple questions over here.
Yeah.
Mr. Weller, I heard you had a small part involved in the upcoming remake. Is that true?
Of RoboCop?
Yes.
No, man, I'm in Star Trek. RoboCop's done, man. No, I did not. I was never approached, and nor would I unless, as Robert Mitchum said once again, how much and where.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I wished him well, by the way. But I do agree with Harry.
Yeah.
This is insane to pull. It's definitely a political play. It's a very popular movie. Some ninth grader marketing guy in there who thinks he's a genius. That, we got to get rid of Ro. Everybody plays. They revent it. They throw it. No, let's pull it. Get it out of there.
This is a beautiful movie. They won't.
Well, I mean,
capture the poetry of it.
one of the things that's been going, one of the reasons I got so angry at Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, was when Kevin Costner thought that to promote his film, he should shit on the Errol Flynn film.
Oh my God, he did?
Oh yeah, he said, oh, it was ridiculous. They had all these rhinestones all over the costumes. It was so pretty, and I was just like, motherfucker, that's my favorite movie of all time.
Man, that's one of the great movies. Listen, I got to tell you, one of my mentors, just on that note, because Harry and I love talking about movies. And here's a little anecdote. I could tell you all night long. But one of my mentors, and I just saw him in Dallas, at Dallas Film Festival. I mean, a mentor. A guy, I've been on his sets. I never worked with him. He's the guy who really kicked me out of the Winnebago. He said, get out of the Winnebago, Weller, and go direct. You just got you're too smart to be in the Winnebago too long. It's Billy Friedkin. You like Billy Friedkin? I mean, and they're honoring him at the Arrow. And, he said this thing to me once. He said, I was here talking about like big balls, the actors of the 50s, both English and French, and doesn't matter if it was Belmondo, Delon, or Robert Mitchum, or Richard Burton, or whatever, that, this wasn't, why isn't this fulfilled? Why isn't this fulfilled now? I mean, it's a lot of good actors, but come on. Have you seen anybody with the balls of Robert Mitchum around on a film screen? No. And, and Friedkin says, well, Mo, if he likes you, he calls you Mo. And he talks very loud. This South Chicago poor Jew who is a shooter. He shot French Connection himself. You know that? He shot the chase himself. He was a news shooter.
Without permits.
With no permits, no lockdowns, no nothing. And two stunt guys. Greatest chase in the world. 6 o'clock on a Sunday. That car goes against live traffic? That's live traffic. No permits, no cops, no lockdowns. 3 PAs, 2 stunt people. Dig it. And the guy who did Bullet, who plays the bad FBI agent, and the only reason why that guy would do it is because they let him play the FBI agent. Right. And, I just on that note, because when I freaked out, I said, hey, you did that with no lockdowns, no permits. He says, Mo, it wasn't even in the script. I'd seen Bullet. I wanted to add it. It was just the subway chase. Anybody know French Connection? Am I losing you here? He said, it's a subway chase. Mo, I wanted to do what Bullet did. So I said, get that guy from Chicago. I'm from Chicago. He came in, he said, I just what I want to do. I want to add his chase. Through the L. Down the L. Great. 20 blocks. They chose it. He says, okay, what are your permits? He says, don't have any permits. He says, well, what do you got? He says, I got a girl, a baby's carriage, and a guy in a taxi cab. That's it. He says, well, we're going to lock it down. No. Just free drive it. And then he had to give him a part in the movie. You know all this, right? It's true. It's true. Greatest chase ever. No, you can't do that. And so Friedkin, who's very self-forthcoming with his own mistakes, and I will get back to why I brought up Friedkin. What were we talking about before that?
You should always bring up Friedkin, but...
What were we bringing up Friedkin?
This guy keeps you out of the Winnebago. Talks you out of the Winnebago.
Yeah, but he said something. Oh, yeah, about Errol Flynn. Remind me of this.
Yeah.
So anyway, he said, Mo, a guy was very taciturn, that driver. You ever see Bullet? Mm-hmm. The guy driving the Dodge Charger? That's the guy. Richard, I forget his name. Else plays the bad FBI agent, drives that thing. So, they fill in the Hackman close-ups later. So then they start... And their little geographies. They got a PA in the back, a microphone with the girl in the baby carriage, a stunt girl, and a PA with a microphone in the cab that pulls out in front of them, right? So they're going to drive, go around some live traffic, go onto the L train. There's a girl in the baby carriage, come back. Remember the order of this thing, right? The cab pulls out, go around the cab. Okay, he's looking down the barrel of like a 17-millimeter lens. And when you do that, even though you're going 60 miles an hour, it kind of feels like 20. This blows by real fast, but this goes real slow. Right? And he knows that. But, they do it, and it just goes by. And he says, he pulled over, and he said, You call that fast? He's about that loud. Now show me what you really got. And he says, the dude just stared at me. And I knew I was in deep shit. And when he went around and reset, he didn't say anything. And he said, and Freak says, I started to mollify him, apologize a little bit, said, okay. And the guy just sat there with that car going. And that's when the second take, don't need the 2 takes, man. Bang, round traffic. Now it's about 15 miles an hour faster. Weave into the middle, right? And they said he went into the middle too soon because they weren't to the baby carriage girl. He just went in the middle. Ding! Live traffic, MTA bus. Remember this? Mm-hmm. Live traffic, man. Going 60 miles an hour. Bing, back, baby carriage and cab, and turns around, and Billy Freakin turned around and picked up the PA and went like this to everybody. Run! And then they ran in 5 directions. But anyway, while he's doing this, the thing he was telling me about Errol Flynn and why this is so bullshit, he gave me one of the things. I said, what is it, this balls, it's not like balls, it's like, there's no danger of a guy just walking on a set. You got a lot of actors who need to pump up. Like, I'm not necessarily a dangerous actor. I could be evil, I could be conniving and so forth. Some guys in the 50s and 60s, just walked in and you felt like they could throw you a left hook. Mitchum was one of them for sure. Yeah. Mitchum was so charmed, but you felt like he did not have to act that he would throw someone a left hook right then. Or Richard Boone or Brando, any of those guys. Or Burton. And Freakin said, hey Mo, it's fear. It's fear. I said, I don't quite get that. He said, well, big balls is just not the danger walking on a set. Big balls is like fearlessness. When's the last time you saw Errol Flynn in Robin Hood? And I go, man, Billy, a long time. He says, well, I want to show you what real big balls is. You see Errol Flynn climb a vine up to this balcony where there's Olivia de Havilland. And he says he puts his face an inch away from her and beams. He just beams at her. Nowadays, Mo, they're all shucking and jiving, and it's kind of an attitude, and they got to play like they're charming and so forth. But an inch away from a woman is fearlessness. Fearlessness. And you know what? I was transformed by that, man. Mm-hmm. I immediately go get Robin Hood. You remember that scene?
Oh,
man?
I have it.
I mean, and I look at this. Yeah. Anybody seen Robin Hood? Just get it, man. And look at that guy. I mean, look, he's really good looking. We're all not that good looking, for one thing. But I mean, that is really just fearless. And it's at the Pro 2 shot.
One of my favorite physical performances I've ever seen.
Astounding.
And the vibe of the film is just the universe that I feel I weather all the troubles I've ever felt in my life is through a smile. Because throughout they're surviving blindings, hot lashings, tongues being ripped out, and they still have the ability to smile. Yeah. And I think that's a wonderful way to face a revolution, is with smiles.
God, I tell you, that watching that performance, I just went, that's life-changing, watching Errol Flynn. One more question. 2 more questions. One more. Yes, Paul.
I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how your work as an artist and actor and director has affected your work as an art historian, and then reciprocally, how your work as an art historian is affecting now your work as an actor and director, and maybe making you look at your previous work differently.
I'll say that really fast. My academic work as an art historian has really given me that, which is what I respect Harry so much for. It's making me go back, even though I thought I knew the history of film and I knew how kinetic it was from one film to another. It doesn't matter watching, docudrama, or like I say, noir, adventure, science fiction, or whatever. There were pockets of film that I liked, but other pockets of film that I never exposed myself to. Why? Because I didn't like the genre. I don't really like science fiction. I really don't like watching that stuff. I like thrillers. I don't like horror, and I don't like romance, and I certainly don't like ha-ha comedies. I like noir and thriller stuff. Art history, when you see, it's all a connective tissue, has really opened me up to, and you can study art history on your own, but when you get to the Renaissance, it's not just about art history. It's about politics and social science and poetry and money changing and 4 or 5 intercultural things. So you got to have some tutelage on that. That's why I went back to school. But once you start looking at the paintings, and I've lived in Florence, I'm a resident of Italy, I still teach in Florence, I teach all over Italy. When you stand in front of the art with no notes and you're trying to explain the very first movie, by the way, if you haven't been there, you got to go or else we'll never talk again. Giotto, I don't know if anybody heard of Giotto. Giotto is the very first naturalistic painter in the history of the Western world ever. And he also, in Padua, in a very small chapel that's probably only half the length of this, did the entire story of Mary and Jesus all the way around in a movie. It literally in frames, and framed it with close-ups and wide shots and everything. And it is really the first piece of narrative. So when you start to look at that, then you go back. You want to go, so art history's made a huge inclusion to all sorts of other techniques of cinema that it was not open to before. And subsequently, that inclusion of new cinema feeds my directing. We were just talking about I Am Cuba. Anybody seen that? Okay. Most of you don't know what I Am Cuba is. And here's something. I Am Cuba is a Russian documentary. It's definitely... what would you say it is? It's anti-American. Mm-hmm. It was filmed right after Castro came in. They definitely hired Michael Kozlov, I think, to do this. He'd made one great film, When the Cranes Fly. It's all shot, whole film, on a 9.5 millimeter lens. A 9.5 millimeter lens, I could see him and that. But I mean close-ups are shot on a 9.5 millimeter lens. Two people, all you, that guy. All on that lens. And there are tracking shots that go on for 10 minutes with camera handoffs. It's absolutely just the most staggering piece of photography I've ever seen in my life. And Scorsese actually says, here's the opening comments of it, he was about to crank up with Casino and he was burnt out. He'll tell you in the opening thing, he's just burnt out. He had no new ideas. And then Coppola said that they found one of the original prints, they wanted to restore it, and he'd never seen it in 1994, and he saw it. There's a shot of the parade when they finally win in Havana in the revolution from a woman of 50,000 people walking. You take her past up a fire escape, through a window, up to another wall, on top of a roof, inside of a cigar factory, to the rolling of a cigar, that the guy gets up, walks out, back down a roof, goes down some stairs, back out to the woman you started with. Can you imagine that? You remember that shot?
Yeah.
You guys remember this? It's like, I saw that. I just saw that 2 weeks ago. I'd never seen it. I tried to get in the Thalia back in New York and New York and NYU. There's guys your age standing around a block. I wasn't going to stand there. I had a hot date. I was going to waste 2 hours standing in line in a movie. Now the thing is out in a box set. I'm doing this Hawaii Five-0, and the DP says it just came out in a box set. And Brian Spicer, the showrunner, sent it to me. So I just saw it 2 weeks ago, and I saw it, and I saw it, and I saw it again, and I went. And Scorsese says it reinvigorated him. It redefined cinema. I Am Cuba. I'd have never been available to that till I started studying art history. I was only watching the movies I liked. And there's a great thing. I'm going to leave you with this. If you take nothing home, take this home. When I started studying art history, and how many times have you heard this? I like one. I know what I like. I don't like that, but I know what I like. How many said that? Yeah, come on. You've all said that, right? Yeah. You look at some painting and you go, I know what I like. I don't like that. The granddaddy of art history, a guy named Ernst Gombrich, is a German Englishman who just passed away at 102. He was also a great children's book writer. In about 1935 said, and this pertains to film. This is why art history came back to film. This is a really great question for me. He says, you don't know what you like. You like what you know. If somebody takes you by the hand and explains the kinetic evolution of visual history to you, it may not be your favorite, but you will like it. There's a very famous painting in MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, and it's black. It's by Piet Mondrian. The whole damn canvas is black. And if you get close to it, you can see it's actually quadrants of brushwork this way, and then brushwork this way, and brushwork that way. And I was explaining to a guy, a banker, he says, well, what is that? And I said, well, listen, Piet Mondrian, anybody know Mondrian? I said, right. Piet Mondrian was a realist. Piet Mondrian was an incredibly gifted, figurative, would paint photorealism for you. And then he got into a little bit of Impressionism and Post-Impressionism. And the thing about Post-Impressionism is that they say, well, you know what? It's not even how the light hits all these seats. It's the edging of each geometric piece, like the round white baseball cap goes to the, and if you look at Cezanne, you'll see that. It's not the still life. Next time you see a photograph of Cezanne, it's not the still life. Look at the black outlines of each circle, of each triangle, whatever. He's pulling that from the Renaissance, is what that is. And then what happens? What happens after you get those geometric shapes that are edged? You go into cubism. You say, well, let's just abstract that image geometrically. And who cares about the relationship of space? You understand? So now you have this abstraction of images that look like they don't have any relationship to them. And then after that, what you get is abstract impressionism. Who cares about the image itself? Let's just paint the geometry. Are you seeing this? And that's what Mondrian was doing. It's just one developed to another. I never had, this was what my film thing was. I don't want to watch this movie. I don't watch Bergman. It's like watching paint dry. Now I watch Bergman all the time. You know, Truffaut, 400 Blows. What is it? The kid runs around, he's got no life, and, you know, steals some shit, man, you know. Where's the action, man? And then you watch the end of 400 Blows, is that the end of it? Runs down to the beach and there's nothing, and then turns around and right into the camera, and it's like 17 mil lens, and you're left with, you know. So that's what art history is giving back. It's turned me back into cinema, particularly films that I know I should have watched long ago. And it's all connective stuff, man. You know, it's all great. And I don't know what I like. You know, I like what I know, and I start watching it. I can't imagine not ever liking a film like Persona. You know, I can't imagine I see Persona and go, that's genius. Who's ever seen Persona? Like 5 people, right? Persona is considered one of the 10 most important movies ever made. 2 women on an island. A famous actress who, for some reason, playing Medea, decides not to speak anymore. About 1968, 69. She sees the famous Buddhist burning himself in Saigon, stops talking on stage. Got it? All of her family think she needs rest on an island. She can't be by herself, she may be psychotic. I know, we'll put her with a nurse. Okay, dig this. You got 2 people on an island, one of them's considered psychotic who doesn't speak. One of them's considered the nurse who speaks. One speaks, one doesn't speak. Who do you think becomes the nurse and who becomes the patient? Any of you been in therapy? How much does the therapist speak? Get it? If you haven't seen this movie, man, you gotta run to get it. Also, it's really hot. There's a scene, man, there's a push-in shot of B.B. Anderson, who I worked with Leonard Nimoy. Yeah. Who's ever seen Persona? Do you remember her sitting, you know, she finally starts blabbing, you know, you're blabbing, and I want to take care of you, and finally you're blabbing, and a month later you're just blabbing your life to someone who's just sitting there, man, who's supposed to be the sick one listening to you just spin. And she's sitting on that table, and she talks about seducing a 14-year-old, 13-year-old boy on a beach. Does anybody remember this? Yeah. Are you ever going to forget it? No, you can't forget that. No. It's just that one push-in and one beautiful woman, and one of the greatest actresses ever, B.B. Anderson, describing how her great sin in her life was seducing a 13-year-old boy on a beach, and then it starts to come back, and how she felt guilty for a while, but it is still, bar none, the most erotic experience she ever had. And what are you supposed to do with that at the end of a film? Anyway, thank you, Paul, for asking that. Yeah.
Peter, thank you.
Hey,
so much.
look, I just want to say, you know, and your dad too. You know, I rushed down here. I could have been playing golf with Emmitt Smith, man. You know, I could have been a contender, but I could have been playing golf with Emmitt Smith. But no, I want to be with Harry.
Wisely.
I did chose wisely. But listen, I really have to give it up for Harry Knowles. Is just really absolutely one of the superb filmography human beings and students of cinema that I know. So thank you, man. Thank you so much. And Dad.